All right, hi, and welcome to another episode of Talkin Video. I'm your host, Chris Noble, and this week I'm really excited to have Nicole Sandow, who's also a certified trainer and performance coach. I've known Nicole for a couple of years now. She's a fantastic individual who we connect on an entrepreneurial level, talking business and how to essentially improve ourselves as entrepreneurs, business owners. And she's really great with also public speaking, how to convey yourself, how to communicate. And she's got a lot of really great tidbits to offer. So I'm really excited to have Nicole on the show today. Nicole, how you doing? Thanks for coming on.
Hey, Chris. Awesome to be with you here today. How are you?
I am doing great. Thank you so much.
Very
And
good.
yeah, I always like to start off the show with just asking, when did you start getting involved with these things called, webinars, videos? Like I know with what you're doing at Dale Carnegie is very much has been happening pre-COVID as we record this in the end of July 2020. Everyone's forced to be doing video now, but you were doing this well before then. So what did that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, we've been in typically and traditionally in-person training, but we've always, in some aspect, done online training in the way of sustainment training with organizations. So once we've already worked with their teams and their people in person, we'll meet with them periodically online and ensure that the new skills and the new behaviors and habits that we're working on are maintained, right? Because while we often hear people say practice makes perfect, in actual fact, practice makes permanent, right? And so we've always used online training as a means to helping people have lasting transformation and performance change. You talk about COVID, there's always the post-COVID, pre-COVID, post-COVID. Once COVID hit, our entire business went completely virtual overnight, as I think most industries have really experienced as well. So we're now, for the time being, we're now exclusively online for training.
Well, that's right. And I love what you said there about practice makes permanent. That's something I want to dive into in a second. But these these companies that everyone has gone virtual, you're absolutely right. And you know, pros and cons, because I know there's pros and cons to this in a lot of different ways. What have you noticed with your training services in terms of the benefits of having a completely virtual setup now versus, of course, the things that you're missing with the human to human contact?
Yeah, there's so many levels to that. When we think about organizations and growth, all organizations are working, always thinking about innovation and growth and how to thrive. And, that always stems with their people, right? It's not always about the customer or the product or their service. It always starts with the team and the people there. And how engaged a team is will have a direct correlation on how the organization performs. Today, in a virtual world, the ability for leaders to impact their teams is completely different. They are now faced in having to do that virtually. So, what on earth does that mean? And how can they do that effectively in order to maintain a critical level of employee engagement? And we all know that managers and leaders have the greatest and most direct impact on how engaged their team members will be. And so now what we're really looking at is how to lead virtual teams. And there's so many levels to that.
Yeah, and that's like its own podcast and probably hours and hours and hours of content because we're talking new software, we're talking so many different ways in which you can engage, with people. But let's back up a second. I loved what you said again earlier, which is practice makes permanent. Now, I've been saying a lot on this podcast and to my clients and friends and family that just get in front of the camera, just start talking, and you'll learn. But it is a good point to recognize if you're starting some bad habits, let's say, and you just kind of keep doing those, it does make it more permanent. So, what have you noticed when doing your online training and even for yourself personally? Like we all go through learning curves. When I'm first, even for my podcast, I'm figuring out how to do my own intros and stuff and looking back and going, okay, well, maybe want to look more directly at the camera next time, Chris. I engage with your audience. So what have you picked up from starting this process of being online way more, being in front of a camera way more, any quick tips to set people up for a bit more success so they don't develop those habits that get repeated and repeated?
Yeah, look, I'd say first and foremost, when we talk about what holds people back, it's usually a lack of confidence or fear. When we work with people, public speaking is actually the number one fear out there. You know, people, death is number four fear. So people say they would rather deliver, be in the casket than deliver the eulogy, so to speak, right? And that's, think about now people have to present online. That takes a lot more getting out of a comfort zone. My personal mantra is that growth and comfort cannot coexist. So when we communicate online, here's what I'll say. There's three distinct ways that people will perceive how we communicate. The first one is our words that we use. The second is the tone in which we deliver our words. And the third is our body language. Well, guess what? Now we're behind a screen. You know, most of us are living in a Zoom world where we've all got that Zoomitis kind of going on. And how are we able to sell our ideas effectively when, in fact, our words have the least impact of those three areas of communication? In fact, our words only account for about 7% of how people perceive our communications. 7%. That means that we really need to be more intentional and mindful about our tone and our body language in order to be more effective at selling our ideas or influencing the actions and attitudes of other people around us. And that's really changing the dynamics of what communications look like today online.
Oh my God, you're absolutely bang on. I love that. It's so much about body language. It's so I've had to really adapt sometimes, like when I'm on Zoom, I get into this kind of slouchy mode, right? And I mess up my mic and knock my
Sure.
camera over, whatever it is, right? It says, I had a friend of mine, I was on a Zoom call last week with a bunch of entrepreneurs, and you forget especially when you're on Zoom, you're at home most likely, right? So you're already in your comfort area. You're probably doing the Zoom like PJ bottoms and dress top,
Yeah, I
you
won't
know,
show you what's below the,
right?
the links
Exactly.
today.
This is a theme across the board, right? With people
Mm-hmm.
working from home now is Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
So you really start to forget that these major things that people, even on a not even like consciously, they might be like, oh, we're on Zoom, I forgive whatever they're doing, but subconsciously we're still judging. We're judging
Mm-hmm.
that body language, we're judging that tone, that communication. So
Mm-hmm.
man, if there's ever been a time to get your performance game up, to get your public speaking, because
Mm-hmm.
if anything, now we're public speaking more than we ever have. Yes,
Yeah.
it's not on a physical platform in front of a live audience. Well,
Mm-hmm.
it is just on a virtual platform. If anything,
Right.
there's more people now that can do it, right?
It's so true. And, another really important area is that whole aspect on building rapport, right? This is such a huge thing, right? And so, how can we build rapport with our team, our managers, with our clients or prospects? It's more challenging now because we don't meet in person, we don't shake hands, sit down, maybe share coffee, have some small talk. It's more challenging to do that behind a screen, right? And so that's one of the reasons why, Dale Carnegie's, renowned How to Win Friends and Influence People, the principles from that book, the enhancing relationship principles, are ever more critical today on building rapport so that we can build trust faster with people, even if it's, on different sides of the world behind a computer screen, in order to gain trust faster, which ultimately will lead to greater cooperation. Because as we know, we can't achieve our results independently. We do require the cooperation of others around us. And so having the ability to build rapport faster in a virtual world is becoming ever more critical.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember reading the Dale Carnegie, of course, the famous book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, many years ago. And
Mm,
it's so funny how sometimes, when you get into his examples, they're very dated because he's talking about, things in the early 20th century and stuff
mm,
like that. But the interactions are exactly the same.
mhm.
The principles are unchanging because business is humans, it's human communication, it's human to human connection. And that is not going to change, virtual or not virtual, you know until AI catches up or
Yeah.
something. It's just this
Mm.
is going to be the situation, right?
Yeah.
Forever.
Yeah. It's so, and you even say AI. partially jokingly, but, partially seriously. And, fundamentally, though, human connection will never really ever be replaced. And you said it perfectly, timeless human relations and effective communication principles in order to foster business and growth and innovation and change. It really takes human connection to do that effectively.
Yeah, and it's
And yeah.
and sorry to cut you off there, and it's trust. I mean, that's the thing
Mm-hmm.
too, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's what you're building ultimately is trust.
Mm-hmm.
It's so key with business.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I have another question, which is essentially, okay, you're obviously you're an expert with body language, with communication, with performance, techniques. Could we give our audience a little bit of a couple of tips and tricks, just little snippets they can take away? And for let's use for example, a whole slew. Like a lot of my clients are great examples of people that are very reluctantly getting in front of the camera, and whether it's for Zoom calls or whether it's for an actual promotional video for their business, educational content to promote their business, whatever it is. What are some Dale Carnegie techniques we can give them for enhancing their presence on video?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great question. We have a whole 2-day kind of boot camp course that really tackles, one of the things that people are so challenged and fearful or lack confidence around is, their self-limiting beliefs or their insecurities, how they're going to be perceived. And one main area that I would really encourage people to be more mindful of is going back to those 3 pieces of communication and really thinking about our congruency in our communication. That's a huge factor that builds our credibility and our trust. And so when I say congruency in our communication, what that means is really ensuring that our words match our tone as well as our body language. And, to illustrate that, Chris, if we were just starting this podcast all over again and humor me for a moment, ask me how I'm doing today.
Okay, Nicole, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty awesome. I'm doing great.
I don't
Happy to
believe
be here.
you. I don't believe you.
Probably not. And why not?
Because your posture and the tone of your voice, it's I had a whole conversation about this with another colleague where it's like you can say all the words you want, but if you say them with a really disinterested tone, we all know exactly what you mean, which is the opposite of the words you're saying.
Exactly, right? And so that's one major thing is in the course I was talking about, what we do is we video record people. So much like, Zoom and this, we actually record people and then have them review it back immediately with a coach so that they could see themselves. And oftentimes, the way we think we perceive ourselves when we present is not the same as the way our audience perceives us. And so often when people think that maybe they're being too big or too bold or quiet or whatever it might be, oftentimes they're surprised by watching themselves back and actually seeing what it looks like from a third party unbiased perspective, which is really hard to do, by the way. But when you do that, you can actually identify how your audience might be perceiving you. And so, one thing is record yourself. Practice doing your introductions or your elevator pitches or whatever it might be on video. I always say to people, everyone has a smartphone or something. Record yourself and watch yourself back and be a coach and a critique to yourself. And use that as a platform to help elevate the impact of your communications. Another main thing I'll say is, the best way to ensure that we're selling our ideas effectively and engaging with our audience is to actually engage with your audience. And, to illustrate this point, I'll say, Chris, this morning, did you wake up thinking, oh boy, I really hope Nicole has time to have a couple coffees this morning and, to really, have a good breakfast and to be well rested. And, did you spend your whole morning, thinking about me and whether or not I was good and ready?
Not really.
What might you have been thinking about?
Well, probably everything else that's going on in my business, and I was looking forward to, of course, our chat. But that level of thought isn't exactly happening when you're a busy
Yeah.
entrepreneur, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. We've got our own things on. So you might be thinking about what's going on for you. And similarly this morning, I was thinking, well, am I prepared? Am I well rested and so on? And so, anytime you approach a conversation, a presentation, online, whatever it might be, if I'm thinking about me and my audience is thinking about themselves, what is the likelihood that we're really going to be able to connect on a meaningful kind of level?
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a really good
Yeah.
point because if everyone's in that mindset, how do you connect then on a mental level, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's one thing that we really challenge and coach people on is to be present in the moment and to use a few, all of them, but a few of the really critical principles from Dale Carnegie. And one is to try honestly to see things from the other person's point of view, right? To understand what's important to them. How do we do that? By asking questions, becoming genuinely interested in them, getting them to do the talking. And by doing so, we can actually connect with them. And that is what helps to build the trust and rapport, which will then lead to that greater cooperation.
Yeah, and it's so I could talk about this for hours because this is the kind of stuff that I honestly think it should be even taught in school. Like this is human communication. I mean, how does it get more
Mhm.
important than that in a lot of senses, other than your own mindfulness and taking care of your mental state and your emotional state as well? It would be great to be taught that in school, but
Mhm.
communication, back and forth communication, like everything you're talking about, body language, tone, thinking about, okay, what is my audience or whoever I'm meeting with right now, what do they care about, what are they
Mhm.
thinking of, and why on earth wouldn't I tap into that, you know for so many reasons, but we don't get taught this. There's just never any situation in our formal education, even in second and post-secondary.
Mhm.
There's really not much of that at all either.
Yeah.
Even on the college level, there barely is. So it's like
Mhm.
these are skills that every single person, especially anyone watching this podcast right now, absolutely needs to tap into. And of course, I'm going to have all of Nicole's information in the description below the video with links to these workshops and the Dale Carnegie website, because I really recommend everyone get on that and get your performance game, to a degree it needs to be, especially because you're all being forced to get in front of that camera now. So,
That's right.
this is a great way to improve those skills and ultimately communicate better, which just leads to better results in everything that you're looking for in your life.
Mhm.
Let's talk about, what do you find when people do join up your course and learn all these different ways of communicating far, far better and just more clearer and watching themselves, oh my God, that's how I sound in front of a bunch of people. Or, when people go through the process that you train them through, what do you find at the end of it? Like, what do people say about going through that whole process?
Mhm. A word that comes to mind often is transformation and breakthroughs, right? I say growth and comfort cannot coexist. It really takes getting out of our comfort zones to be flexible in order to create change, right? Because when we don't change, when we don't grow, then we're cozy and we're stuck, but we cannot achieve greater results. And so, we always start from, what is your current reality? Why are you here? Why is this even important to you? And where do you want to go? What is your desired result? What are you trying to accomplish? And, we help with the tools along the way. We help with some coaching. We help, stretch people out of their comfort zone in order to be able to do that. But mostly what we hear is that people gain greater confidence. And the truth is that when you have the tools, you're more competent at something. And when you're more competent at something, you have greater confidence. And the same is true, the reverse. When you show up and you're more confident, you're able to perform at a more competent level as well. You have greater confidence in yourself. And that really goes back to the thing we talked about earlier about practice making permanent, right? We can read a book on how to fly a plane, but we're not going to be able to just go out and fly a plane, right? It takes practice, it takes training, it takes coaching, it takes going through that cycle. It's our whole methodology at Dale Carnegie of performance improvement is identifying the new skill or the attitude, the skill that we want to accomplish, the result, and then going through a cycle of building some core tools, practicing it, getting coaching, real coaching, because if we practice the wrong thing over and over, we're going to get really good at doing that thing wrong, right? It'll become a new habit. But what we want to do is we want to build new habits the right way. And that's where coaching is so important. So practice, coaching, getting that desired result, and then continuing through that cycle, ensuring that our new habits, our new skills become habits. That's really what we're talking about. Performance change. And that takes two critical areas, Chris. It's not just the behaviors or the things that we need to do day in to day out, because anytime you want to change, you need to do things differently, right? But it's not just about what we do. We also really help people tackle the emotional change. So that means, who do you need to be or become in addition to those things that you need to do in order to achieve that real lasting performance change? So that's our whole methodology right there.
Yeah, and I love that. There's a big thing that I think a lot of entrepreneurs, business owners, all shapes and sizes, and honestly, just any individual that's trying to market their, whether it's a medical practice or, pretty much anything these days, even if you're just trying to get a job at another company, you're selling yourself at some particular time. And that whole journey of selling yourself, there's confidence, there's competence, but then the whole other side is the emotional roller coaster ride that some things work out, some things don't work out, and then you thought you had, oh, this is definitely going to be the way it's going to go, and then that doesn't pan out at all, but this other thing pans out. And this whole roller coaster ride of being an entrepreneur, being a business owner, but also just, especially honestly, just trying to have a job in this day and age is it's kind of crazy. And to be able to talk about the emotional side of it, and to be okay and have that open conversation with someone who's not only been down that road many times, but has solutions and has like a training in that. It's like a psychotherapy for business owners in a way.
Right? Sure. No doubt. You really hit it on the nail when you said selling our ideas. I had a conversation just this morning with someone about, being in sales. I said, you're in sales, and she said, no, I'm not. Like, I don't sell anything. I'm like, we are all in sales, right? We're all selling ourselves. In fact, Daniel Pink, who wrote To Sell is Human, says, and his research shows that we're all selling our ideas in some way or form about 40% of the time. So that might be something as simple as trying to sell the value of brushing our teeth to our kids, to something as big as trying to sell innovation within our organizations, right? And so selling our ideas, having the ability to influence others and their actions and their attitudes, that right there is selling. And that takes confidence, and it takes people skills, and it takes communication skills and leadership skills, all sort of what we call the 5 drivers of success, all things that really will make one successful, both professionally and just generally in our personal lives too.
Yeah, great point. Because you know what, everything you do in your business life, especially in this day and age when our businesses are so intertwined with our personal, it absolutely it transcends into your personal life. So whether it's with your kids, whether it's with your partner, whether it's with friends and family, you're trying to influence them to do certain things, not in a malicious or bad way. Almost all the time, it's a constant communication and conversation that we just do these things naturally. And it's using that word sale and maybe just reframing how you look at the idea of selling things, right? Because anyone in a job is trying to sell to their manager or their boss of, this is why I'm really good at what I do, and maybe this is why you should be giving me a raise or promoting me. It's the
Absolutely.
same thing as a business owner trying to sell their business, just as it's the same thing as a mother or a father trying to sell brushing their teeth
Yeah, no
to their
doubt.
kids, you know?
Not
So
sure which one's harder sometimes, but
it depends on the situation. They are all tricky depending
Mm,
on what's
yeah,
going on,
but
right?
it is a skill, and it's a skill that once you practice and you work on that, you naturally become it becomes your default, right? You
Yeah,
become better, and it's really about connecting and selling the value, not so much those words that we use, but how do we do that? It goes back to that, communication piece, how people are perceiving us and how influential we can be in our message as we do that.
absolutely. Well, let's conclude this podcast with a last little point. I always like to leave our audience with just some final thoughts, but and I'll get you to repeat your information at the end of it, Nicole. But
Mhm.
let's leave our audience with a little bit of some inspiration, perhaps on again, let's consider these folks watching are making that consideration of should I get in front of the camera? Should I really start to dive deeper on my how I look and come across on video, especially with all the Zoom calls going on? What would you like to kind of leave our audience with, feeling inspired to get in front of that camera?
Yeah, I think I said it before, and I'll say it again. And here's really like, what I would inspire people with is that, growth and comfort cannot coexist, right? And so I challenge you to get out of your comfort zone, get out of that space of fear or limiting beliefs and trust yourself that when you put yourself out there and you try new things, you really can achieve new results, right? The results and opportunities live outside of our comfort zone. So the more you practice stretching your comfort zone and trying new things and doing different things, even if they seem fearful in the moment, the greater the possibilities you will have at your fingertips.
I love that, and I'm going to add on to what Nicole's saying on a philosophical side of things, because, any type of innovation that ever happens, ever, always comes from taking a chance and making some mistakes along the way, if not
Mm-hmm.
lots of mistakes, and learning and improving on those mistakes. And
Mm-hmm.
I think we're brought up in a society that really frowns upon making mistakes, and it, can really, make people very scared to take those steps that are outside of their comfort zone. But if you ever want to make any progress anytime in your life, you're gonna have to take a step into that area of
Mm-hmm.
I'm uncomfortable. I don't know. This feels a little weird. Oh God, I kind of want to throw up
Yeah.
before I do this. Like
Yeah.
those are good signs.
What it is, it's becoming more comfortable being uncomfortable, and that just, that gets easier over time. It really does. And with the right tools and with the right coaching, you can really accelerate that big time.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. So let's let the audience know, where can they find you, Nicole, and how can they get in contact, and maybe some more information on these awesome courses that you guys are offering.
Yeah, reach out to me directly. I'm always up for a call, a Zoom, or whatever it is. My direct email is nicole@dalecarnegie.ca. We've got, dalecarnegie.com website, lots of information, but mostly, and true to what we do, I'd love to just have a conversation. That's the best way to get the ball rolling.
Okay. That's fantastic. I appreciate it. So once again, everybody watching, you can get all that information in the description below.
Mhm.
And Nicole, I'll have you stay on after I stop recording here, just to have a couple words after.
Sure.
But thank you so much for coming on the podcast this week. Really
Thanks.
appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me. I had a blast. Thanks, Chris.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So thanks again, everybody, for watching Talkin' Video. And we'll catch you next time with more tips on how to get out there, get out of that comfort zone, get uncomfortable, and come across to your audience the best way you possibly can.
There
So
you
we'll chat
go.
with you soon. Okay.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thanks, Chris.
No problem.
Bye.